First and foremost, I'll start the same way that we did last session by saying thank you all for attending. It's an absolute privilege to spend the afternoon with you or morning today. If you joined us for the 101 session, welcome back. And if you're just joining us for the first time for this 201 session, we're glad to have you. Um, as you might expect, Elise has put together some excellent content for you all today. Before we get to that, I wanted to quickly introduce Fathom and IQVIA Business and share some context for the content. So, Fathom is the leading digital marketing agency for healthcare. We work with hospitals and health systems to drive brand awareness, increase patient acquisition, engage target audiences, right? Our specialties include paid media, SEO, marketing automation, and the strategy, measurement, and analytics required to maximize the effectiveness of our work in those channels. A couple housekeeping items. Please ask questions throughout. I have the Q&A up in front of me, and I will make sure to interject where it's applicable to make sure questions are answered. We'll keep this conversational. Second, we're going to go through a lot of content today. Rest assured, as a follow-up, we will send the recording, the slides, and some additional resources. So don't feel like you have to screen cap every slide unless you have a presentation this afternoon and want to steal these things. By all means, do that if that's the case. Like we discussed last session, everyone's talking about AI. Many of us are trying to make sense of the opportunity that it presents. And we shared a stat in the 101 session that the reality is most of us are just a little bit overwhelmed, 54%, in fact. And so the goal today is to change that. And before we get into the content, if you missed last session, here is 101 in 4 points, right? AI can be a helpful tool with your expertise and guidance. It cannot replace those things. And as you explore solutions, being clear, providing context is essential to engaging with AI. As I'm sure we're all aware, the use cases to apply AI in our work and personal lives seems absolutely infinite. And so we really recommend starting with things that you do every day and therefore understand deeply so you can check AI and its output for biases. And finally, compliance is important, but it shouldn't be a barrier. And so in the 101 session, we shared some guidelines for vetting tools and setting clear guidelines to help you explore AI safely. And I think this was the plan, but I'll commit to it now. We'll share the link to that 101 session as well in the follow-up to this one, just in case you didn't get that in your inbox last time. 3 learning objectives for today's session. I promise this is my last slide, and then we'll get into the content that Elise has prepared. First and foremost, what we're going to talk about is an intentional, methodical approach to identifying opportunities for AI integration. Recommend not just jumping in and getting started without having a plan. We'll talk about why and share some details to start. From there, we'll discuss how to build practical AI workflows. It's natural to want to start to explore and adopt tools. We recommend thinking about the processes and workflows where AI can create the most value first so that you have a plan. And then finally, and this will be the majority of our conversation today, we're going to share specific examples of how AI can add value and create efficiencies in your work. And so Elise has put together a lot of real life examples from the way that we're delivering digital marketing for clients that you can take and apply today to make your work better, more efficient, and help you drive better results for your groups. So with that, we'd love to turn it over to Elise to help us understand the methodical approach and take it from there.
Great. Thank you, Joe. So like Joe mentioned, we wanted to start out giving an overview of the general approach as to how we get to AI workflows. Speaking from experience at Fathom, when we first started our AI adoption journey, we did some of these things. We definitely put some thought into skills that we wanted to beef up and use cases that we thought were going to be most impactful. But we did jump pretty quickly into the tool exercise. And so that generated a list of, I don't know, 20 some tools that we wanted to make maybe invest in. And we kind of took that as a pause and went back to the drawing board and started to really think through our use cases. And I'm glad that we did that because otherwise we would have probably a lot of tools sitting around collecting dust today. So definitely encourage this approach to AI adoption. And like Joe mentioned, we will spend the majority of the time today talking about practical use cases, but just a couple words of advice and some tips and tricks to help get you started and make sure that your AI adoption journey is successful in the long term as well as in the short term. So we'll walk through a few of these initial steps just around gathering some opportunities and vetting them to make sure that you're applying AI in the most practical and helpful ways for you and your work. And then we'll talk through actually defined workflows and some examples of those. And then we'll end with just a note around continuing to iterate on and optimize those workflows once you build them out. So first and foremost, asking yourself some simple questions. This is a great way to start and inventory opportunities where you might be able to apply AI to your work. So some questions you might start out with, is there a skill that you've been wanting to grow or refine? Thinking about how AI can be a way to kind of close a skills gap on your team. Are there tasks that you spend a lot of time on, but you can't really deprioritize because they're important to business success? And similarly, are there a lot of redundancies in your work, things that you just do over and over again every week? And then what outputs do you think could be stronger if you just had more time or resources to put into them? And maybe AI can fill some of that gap for you and be that resource that you've been looking for. And simply put, if you go through these questions and you're not quite sure where to get started, what projects would you delegate to an intern if you had one over the summer? That's a great way to start thinking through what are some simple, repeatable tasks that I would pass to someone else when they're in the early stages of getting up to speed on my team, and how might I view AI as a partner or an intern in that way? And you can see this lovely ChatGPT generated image over on the right. We would be remiss not to include some AI generated imagery in a presentation about AI. The 4.0 image generation is a far cry from what it was. It's much improved, but it does still struggle with spelling in some cases. So if you see anything funky going on that notebook, that's why. So once you've generated a list of potential opportunities, the next thing I'd recommend doing is doing a quick check just to understand which of those use cases are actually suitable for AI. We talked about this a little bit in the 101 session, but today AI cannot do everything. It's good at specific tasks, and it still requires a good amount of human intervention and expertise in order to take it the full 9 yards. And so what you want to think about are some basic things like, is this repeatable? Is it routine? Does it involve a lot of data processing or language? That's a good indicator that it might be suitable for AI. Is it something that's taking a lot of your time away from more strategic activities? That could be a good indicator that it's well suited for AI. And could AI assist you even in the initial stages of the work, maybe not thinking if it can deliver the end result, but can it be a helpful thought partner for you or a way for you to free up some time in the early stages of brainstorming or what have you? And to give you some examples of what that looks like in practice, these are some tasks that we generally have found AI is well suited to support with versus some that AI maybe struggles with supporting in a more robust way, or things that we just feel as humans we personally want to prioritize our time in these areas. So things that are really suitable for AI in its current state would be anything with campaign data analysis or generating insights. AI is a really powerful analysis tool. It allows you to put in a ton of data and derive a lot of insight really quickly. And that's one of the use cases we'll talk through in more specificity later on. It's great at forecasting. It's excellent at research and combing the web and saving you a lot of time clicking into different websites and reading a lot of content. It can really quickly summarize those findings for you in a way that's digestible and impactful and easy to understand. It does a great job of repurposing content, and it's really great as an organization and communication tool, which I'm sure if you're using AI at all today in your work, those are probably some of the early ways that you've started to get more comfortable with it, just using it for things like meeting agendas, helping you craft emails, etc. On the flip side of that, things that we maybe don't recommend leveraging AI for in isolation or haven't seen it be as successful with would be being the final point of review or approval. We talked about in the last session making sure that you have human oversight over any AI powered workflows. So really making sure that your eyes are the last eyes that see some of this work before it's passed on to additional stakeholders. Campaign activation, a lot of the work that we do as marketers lives inside of ad platforms or a CRM, places where there's AI already built in, but it still requires human keys on a keyboard to some extent to actually activate some of these things. So that's an area that we rely on humans for. Obviously, managing stakeholder relationships or doing more sensitive work like patient interviews, those are things that may not be the most suitable for AI at this point in time. So you might think of those as the areas where if you free up time in other cases where you're using AI, you can then pivot some of that time to some of these more human dependent tasks in your work. And so once you have a list of opportunities, you've vetted them for AI suitability, you probably still have quite a few use cases on your list, and you're probably still feeling a little bit overwhelmed. And so what we recommend doing as another point of vetting opportunities for AI support would be to prioritize those things on a scale of both efficiency and value. So efficiency is sort of low-hanging fruit for AI application, right? It's going to save you time in some capacity. And while that's a really great benefit, we strongly recommend also looking at the value of that work. So there are going to be tasks that you're going to see a lot of efficiency gains in, but they're not ultimately valuable to you and your role or to your organization. And so we recommend prioritizing work accordingly and starting with things that are going to produce the highest value to you as well as the biggest efficiency gains, and then prioritizing last things that have the lowest value and the smallest efficiency gains. And you'll start to see some examples of what are talking about and how we would classify these things. As we move into the next slide, you can see things like marketing campaign performance analysis. Takes a lot of time today. There's a lot that goes into gathering data and analyzing it and deriving insights, but it's also really valuable. That's how we build confidence with our stakeholders. It's how we demonstrate the impact of marketing in our work, how we communicate and justify budgets for next year. So it's really important, and it's an area where AI could play a really supportive role versus something on the flip side like internal meeting agenda creation. Probably not something you're spending a ton of time on right now. AI could do it and do it well and do it quickly, but it's not going to produce the biggest value or efficiency gain for you and your role. So that might be something that you tackle last as sort of a final step in your process while you devote more time and resources to figuring out how you can use AI in ways that are more impactful, more valuable, more efficient. And so if it sounded like a lot of upfront work, it's because it is. It's intentionally designed to be that way. As we said, we have been through this AI adoption journey ourselves, and we've definitely seen cases where people have jumped into tools too quickly and then they're missing out on some of the opportunity analysis, and they might have short-term gains in adopting that tool, but long-term there might be some challenges there. So really recommend taking the time to vet your opportunities, understand if they're suitable for AI, prioritize them. These things will also help you build confidence and buy-in with your team. So if you take the time to really do this upfront work, you're then able to have much more informed conversations with stakeholders and team members about why you're pursuing AI in the ways that you are. And it also positions you well to then measure the impact of this work. So if you've really vetted what value these workflows have for you and your role in your organization, as you actually start to implement and onboard AI, you can then clearly communicate how AI was able to help you do those things better or faster. So really recommend taking that time in the upfront, even though it might seem like a bit of busy work, just to make sure that you have all those opportunities vetted and prioritized before you get into actually assigning tools. On the tool front, I think we mentioned this in the 101 session too. There isn't necessarily one AI tool out there that can do everything from a marketing standpoint from end to end. There are tools that excel in specific use cases. So things like Chat and Claude and Jasper are all really great at content creation. You have tools like Accio that are great at data and reporting. Any of our ad platforms or CRM systems have a lot of AI built into them already to help with optimization and measurement measurement and platform. And then there are tools that sort of sit on top of everything, like a Copilot or a Capably, where you can truly automate workflows, pulling levers of different AI tools across the board. And so this is just a little bit of a snapshot of what the tool landscape looks like. I think at the end of 2023, there were 50,000 AI startups worldwide. In 2024, that was 67,000. By the end of 2025 is expected to be 100,000. So you can start to see why relying on one tool in isolation isn't necessarily a sustainable solution. There could be 40,000 more tools throughout the course of this year that could pop up. And so really focusing on the workflow and the ways you which you want to employ AI is going to set you up for success long term. And then you can plug in different tools as they become available and different features within those tools. That's the easy part. But thinking through the workflow first and foremost, and then which tools or skill sets do you need to employ to make that happen is how we like to think about the tool piece of it.
Elise, want to pause for a second. First to offer an encouragement and then to ask you a question on the spot. So, first, the encouragement. We're about to jump into workflows and use cases to share screenshots of Elise in these tools doing marketing work. And so, please, as we do that, drop questions into the question and answer function. If you hit the three dots next to the more button, you'll see a Q&A. That's where you can enter in your questions and we will hit those as we go through the content. That's the encouragement. Now for the question. So, Elise, you are a strategist, you are a media planner, you're a team leader, and so in your work day to day, help me understand the pie chart of these tools. Which tools are you using most? Which tools are you using a little bit? What does that pie chart of AI tools look like for you?
Yeah, for me personally, I use ChatGPT pretty much all day, every day. I think it's sort of the most basic in the sense that it can do the most things. Like it's pretty flexible in terms of how you can engage with it. You can use it for some basic analysis. You can use it to generate images and content. You can use it as a thought partner. And so just because of the fact that I can use it in so many different ways, it's where I spend the most time. I often test things out in Claude if I'm not quite getting the response that I'm looking for in ChatGPT. Sometimes just trying a different model is helpful. And then second to those, I would say Accio, just from a data analysis standpoint. That's, as marketers, I think a place where we all spend a lot of time is just trying to derive insight from the data. And so really love being able to lean on a tool like Accio for that.
Thanks. And that encouragement worked. We did receive one question related to the data that we put into AI tools to generate insightful marketing campaign performance. Do you want to speak quickly about the sorts of data we're putting into these tools? That's going to be a use case we share later, but I'm thinking sharing it a couple times will be helpful for the group.
Yeah, in terms of the type of data that we're putting in, it is mostly campaign performance data from various ad platforms. So things like spend, impressions, clicks, CPM, click-through rate, quantities of conversions, that type of thing. We're not inputting any PII or any data that can tie something back to an individual patient, but we are looking at things like aggregate performance data from our marketing campaigns to help us understand what worked and what didn't.
Is that data perfect, or do you let AI help you make the data more perfect?
I would like to say that the data is pretty close to perfect. We have a pretty robust data infrastructure here at Fathom that makes pulling data and putting it into AI tools much simpler than it would otherwise be. We know in the healthcare space, data is really fragmented, and you probably have data from one ad platform over here, data from another campaign over there, and just getting them together is a lot of the work. AI definitely can help you merge data sets and refine formatting, make sure that everything looks super consistent. The more high quality your data that you're putting into AI, the more high quality your output. And so it's definitely worth the time investment. And depending on what your starting point is, everyone's starting from a different level of sophistication as it relates to measurement. AI can definitely be a partner to help get you to a place where you're putting a quality input in.
Thanks, Elise.
Yeah,
Let's jump into workflows.
great. So the first workflow that we wanted to talk through is as it relates to content generation, specifically ad copy. I think this is one of the most obvious examples of how to use AI. It's generative AI. The way we engage with it is language, the output is language. And so a lot of the initial use cases for it are around things like content generation because it's something that AI really excels at and is really good at. And so what you see on screen here is an example of what a process for generating ad copy for a campaign might look like. You might start by developing an audience persona, do some research and data analysis in the middle to help you craft really data-driven messaging themes before you ultimately turn that into your actual ad copy, get feedback internally, and then activate that ad copy in platform. So it's a pretty lengthy process that requires a lot of human involvement, some data gathering, some analysis, a bunch of different functions and skill sets. And what you can see here is where we have plugged AI into that process. So AI is super helpful at things like developing personas. It can do a really good job helping you conduct competitor research and analyzing data around what competitors are saying and how well it's working. It can help you analyze historic ad performance so you can see what's worked well for you in the past, what messages you should focus on, what you should stay away from. And it can ultimately help you be a brainstorming partner in terms of generating messaging themes. What you can see is that from a human standpoint, we still are leaning on human expertise to actually craft and write the copy and activate the copy. But we're using AI to help get you to a point where you have all the information that you need to be a strategic writer and activate on that copy in a meaningful way. And then we're also using AI to get feedback, which isn't something that we're going to go into a ton of detail about in this presentation, but it's one of my favorite ways to use AI because it does a really great job of coming to it from the mindset of any stakeholder, maybe the cancer clinical stakeholder that you're working with internally, getting their feedback on what would they say about this copy or this content. Does it align with their expectations? What questions might they have about it that I could answer so that you have a really robust output and are also anticipating some of that feedback and any pitfalls that you might run into along the way. Today, what we're going to dive into for this particular workflow is around generating messaging themes. That was something that actually came out in the 101 session. There was some interest around specifically understanding how to use AI in this way. So we wanted to drill into this a little bit further and show you what exactly this looks like in practice. So for this, we turn to ChatGPT, and Sierra Vista is a fictional health system that I made up also using ChatGPT. So you'll see them throughout, but they are completely made up. They're located in Colorado, and they have a fake brand purpose, mission, brand personality, all of which we provided ChatGPT as context. So if you remember from the 101 session, context was a core component of prompting, and giving ChatGPT all of this information up front is helping it build context and understand how to work within the same context that you're working in. So in this case, helping it understand what your brand personality is, your tone of voice, so that any output that it generates, whether that's ad copy or landing page content, is in line with your brand standards and then is something that you can take and use in a really turnkey way. And so you can see here, I prompted it to draft some potential headlines for a paid search campaign, for a lung cancer treatment campaign, and do so based on its understanding of our tone of voice, again, based on what I had provided it. I will say that in the last session, we talked about doing this within a specific thread within chat. So every time you start a new conversation, that creates what's referred to as a thread. And we talked about the value of creating context within an individual thread. OpenAI just announced in the last couple of days that they are broadening the context window. So there's actually a feature that you can go and toggle on in your settings that will allow ChatGPT and OpenAI to use context from all of your chats to help build the context window so that you don't have to worry about providing specific information in this thread. If you've already talked with chat about your brand standards, it can reference that information, even if it's outside of the thread that you're working in at present. So that's a little bit of a change and it may be helpful to you. It may not be. From an agency standpoint, since I work on multiple clients, it's probably something I'm not going to enable in my instance, just because things will start to get murky between if I'm working on one client over here and another client in this thread. I want to keep that separate, but knowing that a majority of you are working on the brand side in the health system systems directly, that might be something that's really valuable because then you can have the full context of all of the work that you're doing for your health system, live in one place and really take advantage of that in a more robust way. So, gone are the days where you have to think in threads specifically, unless that's something that you find helpful to you. And just to show a little bit more about once you do that foundational work and you provide that context to AI once, you can do a lot with it. So in that first example, we were showing you how to turn that into some messaging themes or some paid search headlines. And just to show you how you can apply that in other ways, this is a prompt that I gave in that same thread. I told it, let's pivot away from the headlines. We're good on those. Let's start to draft the content for the landing page where these ads will ultimately point to make sure that everything is super cohesive and that a prospective patient is seeing those same messaging themes articulated in not only the ad copy, but the experience they have once they get to the landing page. And what you can see here is chat doing a really nice job of showing me specifically how it applied the context that I provided to this assignment that I gave it. So it's showing me that I told it that we have a patient first tone, that we speak in plain language, that we want to be warm and invoke trust. And it's showing me how it did that so that it gives me a little bit more reassurance as I'm going to review this and make sure that I'm aligned with the content it's producing. I can rest assured that it's taken into consideration these things and I can maybe focus my attention on any areas that seem less aligned with this. So, really helpful way that chat is trying to build trust with users and repeat back to you some of the context that you shared with it. And it's also prompting here, in addition to having provided me with an outline for the landing page content, like I asked, it's giving me some ideas around what it could do next to help me. So you'll see this baked in more and more as you engage with chat. And it's really helpful, especially as you're just getting started. If you're not quite sure to what extent you can use ChatGPT to help you with some of these things, it'll give you some ideas as to how it can take your work to the next step. So, really helpful. The next use case that we wanted to walk through, something that we also find a lot of value in our work with health systems, would be using AI in the reporting process. So, like we mentioned, it takes a long time to gather all the data that we need to prepare a really impactful report, especially in the healthcare setting where there's so many different data sources. You're running a multitude of campaigns for all of your different programs within your service line. There's probably some fragmentation in terms of the data living in all these different sources. You might want to marry paid media data with your organic data, with your email data, and then ultimately using that to derive meaningful insights and build an impactful report that you can take to a stakeholder is a very large task. And so we mapped out what that process looks like here in broad strokes on our end, as well as where we're employing AI. So there's still a human element in gathering that data, but you can lean heavily on AI to help you format it, to help you analyze it, and even to help you compile an outline for a report that you might then take and build yourself in PowerPoint or your preferred format. And then again, turning it back to AI to help get feedback on that report, anticipate stakeholder questions before you ultimately prepare and take that conversation to them. And so the first step in this process that we wanted to spend some time reviewing is around understanding results and generating insights, knowing that this is where we spend a ton of time as marketers just trying to comb through the data and make sense of it and figure out what is most impactful, what should I do about this information. And so for that step, a tool that we love to use is Accio. It actually uses ChatGPT's 4.0 model. So when you see me engaging with my data in this chat format, it's actually built on ChatGPT, but it's specialized in data analysis. There's a component before this where I uploaded all of Sierra Vista's data from all of the campaigns that this fictional health system is running. And now I'm engaging with that data in natural language. So you can think of it as how would you engage with your digital marketing agency that you work with, or with your BI team internally, or with other internal stakeholders? What questions would you ask of them if you were just having a conversation about performance from a campaign? And so we'll walk through a few different prompts and examples of that, starting with the most basic, and just to kind of orient you to what you're seeing here when you are in Accio and you're engaging in what they call Chat Explore. The user is me prompting it, asking it questions, and then Accio is giving you some insight, which is really nice into the approach that it's taking and telling you a little bit about what it's doing to the data to get to the output that you're asking for. And then it's ultimately answering your question in the form of either text, it'll generate visuals and tables and charts that you can then download and drop into your reports, and then a myriad of other kind of formats as well. So in this case, at the most basic level, I'm just simply asking it for my average click-through rate. Not hard, but probably something that is buried in a lot of data. And if you can just simply ask it a quick question and get the answer returned to you, all the better. So just a quick example there. And then something a little bit more robust. So I mentioned I uploaded data not just from this theoretical breast cancer campaign, but from all of the campaigns that I'm running as a health system. And so what it was able to do was compare the average click-through rate for my breast cancer campaign to that of campaigns that I'm running for other service lines or programs. And this is something we do a lot working with healthcare marketers. It's always helpful to have a frame of reference for what's good. So looking at not only what are my results in this one campaign that I'm running, but how does that compare to other things that I'm doing across the health system? And what does that say about opportunities for optimization or the results that I'm seeing? Are they what I should expect? Should I be approaching things a little bit differently? So AI can be really helpful at kind of broadening your context window and looking at larger sets of data that would otherwise take you a ton of time to comb through. Now let me look at all the reports for all these different programs and compare them to this number. If you're starting with the same data set where all of that exists, you can just easily query it and ask it for that comparison.
Quick question, Elise, as we run through the Accio example, just to get really specific about the what input we provided. Like, talk to me about like the columns that were in the Excel input that allowed us to ask the data these sorts of questions.
Yeah, good question. So I talked about our data infrastructure internally. And so what the output from that is a spreadsheet essentially that includes columns for things like the service line, the program. So in this case, cancer service line, program breast cancer, bariatric surgery, the ad platform. So in this case, the data set I think had search and social data. So it's referencing the channel. And then just those basic campaign metrics, spend, cost per click, impressions, clicks, click-through rate, those things, and then some form of date. So I think at this point the data was monthly. But so it's pretty basic data. It's nothing that's too crazy to get out of the ad platforms themselves. I think the hardest part is just getting the data from all of those disparate sources together, which a tool like Accio can help you merge those data sets and combine that.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. So another way that you can use Accio and an idea for a prompt would be looking at more than one metric and asking a more open-ended question. So it's less specific than just what is the click-through rate. I'm asking it in this case, is it becoming more or less expensive for me to advertise and search? A question that we're asked a ton by our healthcare clients who are looking to understand what the competitive landscape looks like. Should I anticipate more budget next year if things are becoming more costly? Where am I seeing efficiencies? All of those questions are things that a tool like Accio can help you answer. And so it's giving you again some context. It's going to analyze the CPCs, the CPMs, the impressions, the total clicks, and then it returns a result showing you specifically how those different metrics are performing over time, as well as a summarized insight that kind of explains all of that for you in plain language. So, really helpful way to consolidate what would otherwise be a lot of work trying to generate a trend line for CPC, a trend line for CPM, understand what all of that is telling you. This is a really helpful way for you just to ask a question and get an answer. And then taking it a step further, so not only can you ask it more open-ended questions, but you can also help quantify impact using a tool like Accio. So you don't have to rely on just solely looking at things like clicks and cost and how they're trending over time, but what's ultimately the impact of that to you as a healthcare organization. And so here it did a little bit of analysis to help me understand if it's becoming more or less expensive, and then what does that mean for me in terms of the conversions or the patients that I'm acquiring for my health system, and is that trending up or down over time, and what should I do differently based on that? So really helpful question, a question that we ask ourselves a lot as healthcare marketers, and something that is difficult to answer if you don't have something like AI helping you comb through the data and pinpoint exactly the answer to that question.
Great.
Right. And then this is a really complex workflow. So we wanted to give you another example of a way that we're using AI to support with reporting. So you've been engaging with it, you're finding those different insights and understanding the results. And the next thing that AI can help you do is compile that into an outline to help you generate a really helpful report for your stakeholders. So we did that in Accio again. This was actually something I hadn't done in Accio before. I typically would use chat for something like this, but Accio did a really nice job of just based on the context from the conversation I was having with it previously, all of the questions I was asking it, it turned that into a really nice outline for me. And not only that, but it populated some of the initial findings based on the collaboration that we were going through at the beginning. So it populated some of the data for me, highlighted some of those trends that we had talked about. And then you can actually take this a step further. Accio can generate some charts or other visualizations for you that you can quickly download, export, drop into your report without having to spend a ton of time formatting data to get to different charts and graphs. So, a great way to compile all of the work that you're doing in partnership with AI and turn it into a tangible resource that you can then take and layer your strategic expertise onto to bring to a stakeholder in a way that they'll understand it, and clearly communicates impact, and you've done your due diligence to work through what the data is telling you and what that's impactful.
At least pause here for a question. Up front, we talked about evaluating different use cases based on the efficiency gains and the value created. And so help me understand the use of Accio in terms of efficiency and value. And so the question is, how much time are you saving using Accio to generate kind of these initial insights? And then in terms of creating value, what are you doing instead? Right? Like specific examples that we could apply to the work that we do.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it saves you time on some things and you spend more time on others, to your point. So I'm saving time on manipulating data and aggregating data and trying to format things and put the metrics together that I'm looking for. And with that time savings, I'm able to do more exploration and really understand what's happening, why, and talk about what I'm doing about it. So, where we've employed Accio internally on our healthcare accounts, we spend a lot less time trying to get to an answer and a lot more time talking about what we're going to do about the answer that we've gotten. And so, what that means is that we're able to conduct more optimizations, bring forward more recommendations more often, and have more strategic conversations because we're getting the answer and we're getting it quickly. And so we can then quickly pivot over to applying that and using our strategic expertise to figure out what we do next.
That's great. Less time on what happened and more time on, so what are we going to do about it?
Yep, exactly. Right. So some more ways to incorporate AI. We talked through ad copy examples. We talked through reporting. Those are just two of many use cases for how we use AI internally for our healthcare partners and just in general in the marketing space. So we wanted to give you just a couple more in snapshot format. So again, the slides will be shared after the webinar today. So you'll have full access to all of these, but a couple more ways that we wanted to share with you to incorporate AI into your work. The first one being being if you are doing a lot of email marketing, it might be helpful to you to engage AI to help you analyze audience segments. So figuring out who's engaging with your email content, who's not, what content's resonating, what content you might think about reformatting or optimizing so that you can get the most out of your email marketing program. This is a great one to check out and one that we also used Accio to support. If you are running a ton of paid media campaigns and you have several different variations of creative live, as we often do, I know our clients always want to know what imagery is resonating with the audience, what messages are performing the best so that they can take that back to their creative teams and create more variations of what's working well and figure out a way to refine what's not working. So this is a great use case for analyzing that data, what comes out of a DSP or a social platform at the ad level is super convoluted and there's a lot to look at. And so a tool like Accio or even ChatGPT can help you sift through that and get to meaningful insights around what's working and what's not. And then the last example here is related to SEO and content. So if you're looking to revise any content on your website or create any content net new, this is a great way to ensure that that content follows SEO best practices, that the right keywords are included, that you're thinking through the audience needs and making sure that the content directly supports that so that your content is showing up as much as possible in organic search results.
Great. We're about to jump ahead past workflows. I just want to reiterate something that Elise shared before we walked through these last three snapshots. The intention was to provide as many examples as we could in a brief webinar, and so hopefully these snapshots are helpful. As always, in follow-up to the email, we'll share with all these resources. We exist to help you. Please reach out. Elise, myself, any of Fathom's experts are happy to have a conversation and walk through the details. So with that, let's jump ahead to our workflows in motion. Then what?
Yeah, so one thing we know about AI is it's always changing. It changed in the time that we were putting this deck together. That's how quickly it's changing. So just be open to the fact that once your workflow is kind of set, it's going to evolve. And we've seen that happen. Just personally, there have been workflows that we created a year ago that as AI has gotten smarter and we've learned more about how to properly engage with it and what the best way to use it are, we've changed them. We've said we actually don't need these steps in the process, or actually this tool might be more impactful here than this one. So just be open to the fact that this is going to be a continuous journey. So start small. We talked about a number of ways that you can prioritize opportunities that might make sense for AI application. But if all else fails and you're still overwhelmed and not sure where to get started, always start small with something that feels comfortable to you. That's a great way to get started. Make sure that you're refining. So as new features come out, as new tools become available, as your work evolves, feel free to refine your processes and the ways that you're engaging with AI. Training your team is huge. That's been really critical to AI adoption internally. So if you're finding success in a certain AI workflow, make sure that you're sharing that with others. That's been something that we've seen a lot internally. People are eager to hear about how people are using AI and ways that it's been successful for others. So I encourage you to share that. And then, as always, have to put a plug in for human oversight and just making sure that we have our eyes on everything AI is generating, no matter how good a job it's doing or how confident we feel in the process. Always making sure that we're reviewing it, especially if it's going on to patients or additional stakeholders outside of ourselves. We want to make sure that we feel fully confident in those outputs and that our expertise is always part of the equation.
So we did receive a question related to training. We're going to hit some takeaways, and then we have some training resources that we'll share. So we'll hit that question specifically in just two more slides. So Elise, in the meantime, start to think about how marketing departments might invest in AI training for their marketers. But first, some takeaways from the session. If I had to recap what I heard from Elise in just four bullet points over the last 40 minutes or so, here's how I would do it. We know that the exploration of AI, over the course of that journey, you're going to get asked why, or should we, or are you sure? And so we really recommend starting and adopting a methodical approach to exploration so that when you're asked those questions, you've got some documentation to go back to, right? I've worked through criteria to select my tools. I've prioritized the use cases. based on our specific circumstances. I feel really good about starting here for those reasons. A lot of us think about AI as doing the busy work, as creating efficiency, and that is incredibly valuable. Like, don't get me wrong. Also encourage folks to plot out the value creation. What sort of results will this application allow me to achieve or give me space to devote more attention to? As Elise mentioned, we like to start with processes and workflows, not specific tools, because it's those processes and workflows that endure. The tools are going to change and evolve over time. This is true in almost any circumstance. It's especially true in AI, where things are evolving incredibly rapidly. And so think about the process, document the workflow, and then find the tool that's best for that specific circumstance so that you're building for the long term. And then ABT, always be testing. We are marketers. This makes sense to us. It's second nature, but encourage entering the AI exploration adoption journey is a test and iterate approach as if it's a campaign. Plug different tools into those workflows to ensure it's meeting your needs and delivering the results that you expect. We promised resources. And so Elise shared a lot of great content today. Hopefully, you had a chance to join us for AI 101. We will share both of those and follow up to today's conversation. If you're hungry for more, where would I have my team start? Right? The Marketing AI Institute we're in Cleveland, Ohio. They're in Cleveland, Ohio. We don't recommend them because we're in the same hometown. They provide incredible resources for marketers who are exploring AI. And so they've got great curriculum depending on if you're a marketing leader, a marketing manager, a marketing practitioner. They have an excellent annual conference that's coming up this fall. We will be in attendance and we'll send a lot of our team to attend from a learning and development perspective. And so I would encourage you to check out the Marketing AI Institute for sure. There's some really great kind of self-led learning out there for you, whether it's deeplearning.ai, the LinkedIn Learning Academy is excellent. And then HubSpot, lots of platforms, but HubSpot especially has a great library of content to help get started in exploring how can I apply AI in the work that I'm doing today. So those are some of the kind of self-led digital courses that we'd recommend. And the cost of those things is anywhere from free to a few $100s. Also, selfish plug for AI Empowered. And so Elise and the team at Fathom have been publishing and updating an AI guidebook for folks in your situation, exploring AI for healthcare marketing use cases. And so that's got, I think we're over 60 pages of content, of checklists, of frameworks, of timelines, of questions to consider as you're having a conversation with IT around the privacy, safety, compliance of these tools. And so, if any of that sounds interesting, if you're curious about the specific frameworks that we used for adoption, would encourage you to check out fathomdelivers.com/AI empowered. That will be included in our follow-up email as well. And so, one more plug after I'm going to ask Elise a question right now. And then after that, we're going to open it up for questions from the group. And so if there's something on your mind, please type that into the Q&A feature, which one last time, 3 dots next to the more button. You'll see Q&A, type your question in there. Elise and I will get that answered before we close today. But at least the question that was asked by attendee today is, how do you recommend marketing departments invest in AI training for their marketers? So things like buy-in for trainings, software to support the journey, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think some of the work that we talked about in the upfront around really thinking through where you want AI to plug into your team, what skills do you want it to help you expand on, what work do you want it to employ? That's a great way to create buy-in and build trust with your team that AI is going to be complementary to their work and their skill sets. It is not a threat to their work or to their expertise. That's one of the biggest barriers that we hear about is just that teams are a little bit wary of adopting AI because they don't want it to to replace the work that they're doing. And so starting from a place of trust and comfort in the role that AI will eventually play in someone's work is a great way to get their buy-in so that they feel comfortable employing these different trainings and learnings. Like Joe said, there's any number of resources from things that are free to things that require a little bit of investment, and there's value in all of them. So I would say really getting buy-in and input from your team around where they'd like to get started from a training standpoint, what feels attainable to them, and then just carving out a little bit of time a week or a month for training, I think is really helpful in doing that together. That's something that we've seen success with at Fathom. We have a series called Wisdom Wednesday where we'll all spend a couple hours in the morning on Wednesdays learning about new things together. And so that dedicated space and it's collaborative. It really helps with making sure that we're all constantly learning and that we're able to collaborate on those learnings and ask questions of one another and do so in a way that feels a little bit more organic and like a team building experience rather than just kind of going off on your own and watching training videos. But I think getting buy-in based on where you anticipate AI having the most value and then making that a really collaborative experience for your team are places I'd recommend getting started.
To that, I would just add, and I think I mentioned this last session, one of my favorite quotes to sort of inspire exploration is AI is not going to replace us. And I'm confident in that fact, but someone who is comfortable and confident using AI might, right? And so if it's a tool that can amplify our impact, we owe it to ourselves to get to know it, right? And so as a person leading a team, some of the things that I recall from the last 2 years that I would just add on to Elise's point. One, it's a mix of solo and team-based training. It's important to explore your interests individually, and there are things that are relevant for a team. Most important in that process is the conversation that follows, right? What makes sense? What's sparking curiosity? What feels wrong, right? Having that discussion in an open setting is really valuable. From there, I would encourage doing the prioritization exercise together. Like, what are the things that take the most time? Where could we create more value? Going through that exercise together and then sort of dividing and conquering from there. Follow the energy. If someone's really interested in solving for X, Y, or Z, let them, right? And then follow that up with coming back together to discuss learnings and inspire some brainstorming, some collaboration to improve upon the processes. And so it's a mix of like very intentional but organic at the same time. From a buy-in perspective, that sort of approach has been really effective for us as an organization and something we encourage clients to do as well. Elise, did receive a question. Any legal worries using AI for especially some of the applications that we've walked through today? So I know that you've been a part of lots of conversations on this front. Where does that shake out from your perspective?
Yeah, there are definitely always legal worries, right? I think it's a matter of the processes you put in place to mitigate them and to feel confident in the security of what you're doing. So definitely make sure that you're vetting any AI tools that you're interested in using for their security standards and understanding the impact of putting your data into any of these tools. Things like ChatGPT Team, which is a paid subscription that we at Fathom use, allows us to securely put data into the tool without worrying about OpenAI using that data for training or sharing it publicly. So you'll definitely want to look through the fine print and understand what your kind of protections are as it relates to the data that you're putting into some of these tools. Things like Accio, also secure. If you're unsure, then definitely make sure that you seek out that information and that you're anonymizing anything that you're putting into these tools so that you can feel confident that it's not being tied back to a specific organization or individual. And then a lot of these use cases, like the more content focused ones, if they are things that are either already publicly available on your website or in emails, or they will be publicly available from a content standpoint, that's pretty low risk in terms of security. So if you're going to use it to ideate content that is already going to be publicly available and you aren't going to want to pursue copyright protections against, then using AI for those reasons is pretty comfortable and something that you can do so safely. But definitely recommend vetting all the tools that you're going to employ for security standards and making sure that you're aligned internally with your IT department and BI and other stakeholders so that everyone's on the same page around what tools you're using, what data you can and cannot put into them, and sharing those standards out with your team widely so everyone's on the same page and working with those tools in the same ways.
For more specifics, we'll just plug again AI 101. There were some nice portion of conversation around safe and compliant adoption, plus the considerations to account for along the way. And AI Empowered has lots of resources for how to vet tools and what to look for in that journey. And so that wraps the questions that we had received. Before I turn it back to Cassidy, I just want to express a tremendous amount of appreciation for your time, attention, and participation today.